Now you're talking about this woman, a county judge. And when Pam Bondi comes out there and says, we will come after you and we will prosecute you, we will find you, that is meant to have a chilling effect. They didn't need to.
What's your solution? Again, you cite polls, but I apologize. Adults have to do the adult job. It's not going to be popular.
You know what the adult job is? First of all, not announcing this on social media, having to take it down and then putting it back up. The adult thing to do would be to have called her in and have her come in and have a conversation about it. They didn't need to public.
Greg Gutfeld turned a typical live broadcast into something that felt more like a verbal showdown. No costumes, just pure attitude. In a heated moment that quickly grabbed attention, Gutfeld challenged Jessica Tarlov in his own bold style. Was it pointed? Definitely. Was it fiery? Without a doubt. Classic Gutfeld. But what exactly sparked his reaction this time? Buckle up, because things escalated quickly.
That's total indoctrination. All the intersectionality,
By the way,
trans.
That's the statement. You don't think that black trans people exist or black queer people exist or
That's a straw man
people?
or a straw trans. Excuse me.
Don't do that. This is serious.
No, I'm actually being serious. Just because people do not that stuff, because it's age inappropriate, does not make them transphobic. Because you're going there.
Okay, well, let's talk about a book ban now. It's Out of Darkness, a young adult novel about two teens that have a relationship.
Yeah,
it's now been 16 schools.
It all started like any normal day on the 5, the panel at the table, coffee flowing, and the usual lively exchange. Jessica Tarlov came prepared to dive in, armed with charts, data, and a tone that said, I did my research. But Greg Gutfeld wasn't about to let anything pass unchecked, and his sarcasm was dialed all the way up from the jump.
From Medicaid and Medicare to give tax breaks to the wealthy.
Not true, but okay.
It is 100% true.
You are spinning.
I'm not.
You
I
are
am
spinning so fast.
Ahead.
I'm getting under my eyes.
I am looking straight ahead.
They're not.
Ask Josh Hawley. And
Okay,
I would say,
hold on.
and
Let me
you
get him on the
said,
phone. Josh?
tell him I loved his op-ed.
Right.
And Greg mentioned a staggering level of corruption. And I just got a note that the staggering level of corruption from last night's meme coin dinner.
That's what you're focusing on, the meme coin.
40% of Donald Trump's wealth has been accumulated since he became president.
The debate zeroed in on President Biden's economic policies, what some skeptics have dubbed Build Back Broker. Jessica jumped in first, delivering a pitch that felt straight out of a campaign spot. Gutfeld wasn't buying it. Her remarks, packed with familiar political phrases, seemed to follow every line from the standard progressive playbook.
Doctor who forged that letter about him, like, come on here.
Come on is actually comparing him to this. This is a math. Like, you have no reason to question the Dems about this. Are you out of your mind? They have the best doctors in the world and a patient who is arguably the most important patient in the world who gets tested pretty much weekly. They have to check him out, but somehow they decided not to do this. I'm wondering, do you believe that story, or is it possible the Democrats might be lying? Ooh, that's a tough call. Listen to Joe Scar.
Jessica came out strong, firing off stats on unemployment, GDP growth, and green job programs with the kind of intensity that made it feel more like a campaign rally than a panel discussion. She was clearly out to make a point, but what she didn't expect was Greg, already locked in and waiting, ready to fire back with his trademark sarcasm at just the right moment.
Trump, after asking him to overturn the election, to not do his job at certifying it, he says to Mike Pence, you know, you're too honest. When someone says you're too honest, that means that you want them to do the dirty thing, that you want them to do the bad thing. Then on page 15
you can disagree with that. You can disagree with that, but you don't arrest somebody over it.
But you can't disagree with the fact that he knew that he had lost the election because everyone in Christendom.
You're going to try to say that Donald Trump knew he lost.
There's no way.
They're going to try to prove that in court, Jessica. There's no way he's going to be proven that he knew he lost. He still thinks he's president.
Well, then the insanity defense is...
Meanwhile, Greg sat back, calm, composed, and clearly waiting for just the right moment to speak. He didn't interrupt. He didn't even flinch. He just watched with that signature smirk, the kind that says, "Go on, say something bold. I'm ready." And sure enough, Jessica stepped right into it. She claimed conservatives only bring up wokeism to distract from real issues. That was all Greg needed. It was like a spark ready to ignite, a match in an instant flame. You could practically see the gears turning in his head. His look said it all. Bless your heart. Let's do this. Then came the response. Greg dismantled her argument with a mix of sharp wit and political flair. He called out her viewpoint as a blend of idealistic hopes, big government fixes, and showy values straight out of a trendy health store, polished, pricey, and totally disconnected. He poked fun at how she made politics feel like a classroom lecture, led by teachers who still think trending hashtags change the world. Greg's punchline, progressive kindness, he said, is just control dressed up as a hug, like being cold with a smile. The panel laughed. Jessica looked stunned, and Greg, he didn't just win the exchange, he took over the spotlight. It wasn't just bold, it was a masterclass. He joked about her love for data like it was a social media habit, filtered, polished, and all about image. His replies didn't just connect, they hit hard, fast, and left an impression.
Here's a nice thing for you. The second half is missing. Who pays for it? You saw this with student loan theft, described as forgiveness. Who paid for it? You paid for it. You see with immigration policy, who's footing the billions and all that free stuff? You're paying for it. Nothing is free. Nothing is free. And the sooner or later you figure that out, the better off you're going to be. And that's directed at Democrats who don't understand that these policies are going to sink this.
Greg didn't hold back. At one point, he compared Jessica's logic to raccoons trying to manage a retirement account. Messy, confused, and somehow sticky. The studio didn't just laugh, they lost it. Someone in the back nearly choked on a gluten-free muffin. Jessica blinked. Greg smirked. The entire conversation wasn't just flipped, it was set on fire, turned into kindling, and made into a viral TikTok moment. Still holding on to hope, Jessica tried to recover. She put on her best "I'm totally fine" face, the kind you see when someone clearly lost the debate but thinks a spreadsheet might save their pride. She threw out crime statistics, blamed red states, and brought up urban issues like it was some kind of McDrop. She made it sound like Trump was behind every broken streetlight and Greg was his personal driver. But here's the thing, facts, when delivered with attitude and arrogance, don't land. They bounce off. They vanish in the face of confidence and charisma, and Greg had both on full display. He wasn't just replying, he was performing, turning every dry stat into a punchline. It was like watching a comedian riff live, but with political ammo. Jessica tried to counter with Heritage Foundation numbers like they were game changers. But Greg came in with something stronger. Perfect timing, sharp instincts, and a delivery so smooth it felt unstoppable.
This cryptocurrency, who came over here to have dinner with him, a guy from South Korea.
This is not even part of the segment.
So what?
You're talking about a meme coin.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about who's corrupt and who is profiting off the American office.
Did he try to cover that up? I don't think so.
Yes, Caroline Levitt said
you're defending an administration that covered up a dying leader, and you're sitting here going, but meme coin, meme coin.
I'm saying billions.
All right, let's give Paul a chance to clean it up real quick.
Jessica tried to out Greg, but it was like showing up to a sword fight with a butter knife. Sure, her sources were technically conservative, but even they looked like they wanted to crawl under the table and avoid being part of the disaster. Her argument wasn't landing. It was attending its own farewell. Greg, he grinned like he'd just been handed a gift. You could practically hear the producers backstage rubbing their hands like cartoon villains. Even the room seemed bored of her tone, until Greg cracked one of his signature deadpan one-liners, and the audience erupted. It was sharp. It was precise. It was perfect. Jessica looked stunned, like she just realized her parachute was a paper napkin. And Greg, he was already locking and loading the next metaphor. He compared her tone to a TED talk at a kombucha bar in Portland, one of those painfully sincere ones where a guy in hemp sandals talks about how quinoa helped his childhood struggles. He called her arguments intellectual tofu, crunchy, flavorless, and somehow still smug. The audience roared. Even the camera guy chuckled. Jessica sat stiffly, lips pursed so tight she looked like she just tasted a lemon soaked in disappointment. She was marinating in a broth of her own performative pride, clinging to the illusion of relevance. She fired off one last Hail Mary, lecturing Greg that citing data isn't elitist. But instead of a mic drop, it came off like a Wikipedia footnote, with an attitude. She wasn't just losing the debate. She was drowning in her own smug syllables, mistaking moral superiority for a personality.
Decline. They're trying to present themselves as a loyal staff protecting an incapacitated leader. And yet, the policies were anything but feeble. He may have been a mess, but the policies were a coherent list of woke desires. And true, the decisions may have possibly destroyed the country. That wasn't a byproduct of Biden's brain. That was deliberate and determined, and we need to find out who that person was. This is what Trump is talking about when he's mentioned the auto pen. This isn't just about a cover-up of Joe's incapacity.
Meanwhile, Gutfeld, looking like a fox let loose in a vegan petting zoo, leaned back with the smug ease of a man who already knew how this story ended. That smirk of his, it could curdle oat milk. He declared that debating Jessica was like arguing with an NPR podcast, monotone, painfully earnest, and completely allergic to humor. She's like if C-SPAN and a yoga retreat had a baby, he quipped, not even bothering to hide the disdain. Jessica blinked, stunned, like someone had just confused her favorite barista's name. Then came her grand rebuttal, a jab at Greg's pants. Yes, his pants. After all the stats, the rhetoric, the snark, she chose slacks. Cute, but weak, like throwing a cotton ball at a flamethrower. Greg didn't even respond. He just brushed it off like actual lint, because it was lint. Why waste a comeback when you've already knocked the entire argument into next week's news cycle? By now he had so thoroughly owned the segment, you'd think he was collecting rent. Jessica sat there rattled but still holding on to that forced, post-woke Joan of Arc energy. That smug smirk she wore. It didn't scream, "I've got this." It screamed, "I have no idea what just hit me, but I'm going to pretend I meant to get run over." It wasn't confidence, it was delusion, dressed up as dignity.
That was a bad representation by Trump. It has to be to their detriment. Who lost? No one.
But basically, everyone who is defending Donald Trump in this, from Kevin O'Leary to some folks here, is saying it is okay to falsify your business records, to issue false financial statements, to commit conspiracy for insurance fraud. When he goes out there,
where's the fraud?
The fraud is, and David Brooks lays this out really nicely.
But
Donald Trump continually.
There were 3 sets of books. Where do you get that from? Where do you get that from?
Greg, meanwhile, looked like he had just scored a political touchdown, moonwalked into the end zone, and slammed the ball down on Jessica's moral pedestal. Twitter? Oh, it exploded. Liberals, bless their conflicted hearts, tried to spin it, calling Jessica the queen of calm, as if blank stares and passive-aggressive sighs are modern signs of courage. Conservatives, though, they crowned Greg the undisputed MVP of televised trolling. Jessica wanted to inspire. Instead, she became a meme. But here's the truth. Greg Gutfeld didn't just win the segment, he crushed it. Jessica came with facts, Greg came with fire. And guess what plays better on TV? Not a spreadsheet, but a scorched earth monologue from a man who's turned sarcasm into an Olympic sport and takes home the gold, flipping both middle fingers in the air. Jessica, bless her overprepared heart, marched into that segment armed with bullet points, polling data, and the confidence of someone who just mastered conditional formatting in Excel. She thought she was about to deliver a masterclass in calm, rational debate. Instead, she got steamrolled like a toddler's Play-Doh set. Greg didn't just counter her arguments, he made them look like poorly translated IKEA instructions. Confusing, redundant, and completely useless. While Jessica read off stats like a GPS that lost signal in a tunnel. According to Pew Research, page 4, Greg was halfway through dismantling her entire persona with one-liners that should be banned in 7 states. She brought a PowerPoint to a flamethrower fight. And by the end, you could practically smell the burnt dignity rising from her side of the screen. The next day, the media circus did what it does best, pretend Jessica had won in spirit, like some martyr of modern punditry. MSNBC wrote think pieces about the power of composure, as if staying upright while getting rhetorically crushed is a moral victory. Slate, always ready with a participation trophy, declared Jessica a modern-day stoic. Cute. What's next? A Nobel Prize for emotional endurance? Meanwhile, Gutfeld's fan base exploded like they just witnessed the second coming of George Carlin. His zingers, especially the now iconic intellectual tofu jab, were instantly canonized in right-wing pop culture. TikTok flooded. Instagram blew up. YouTube Shorts dominated. Somewhere, a teenager got detention for quoting Gutfeld in class. And yes, intellectual tofu is definitely getting embroidered on throw pillows. And Judge Jeanine, off-screen, probably halfway through her second bottle of Cabernet, let out a victorious shriek that sent neighborhood dogs into cardiac arrest. She knows gold when she sees it. And this wasn't just gold. This was 24-karat, hand-delivered, and dipped in the tears of fact-checkers. This was peak Gutfeld. No fluff. No filter. Just verbal napalm delivered in prime time. Jessica thought bullet points were a shield. Turns out they were kindling. This wasn't a debate. It was an ambush disguised as civil discourse, a demolition derby where one participant showed up with a policy paper and the other showed up with a flamethrower. Jessica Tarlov, bless her, came armed with statistics, charts, and that painfully polite tone that screams, "I read The Economist cover to cover and still think I'm fun at parties." Meanwhile, Greg Gutfeld swaggered in like a stand-up comic with a vendetta, weaponizing sarcasm like it was military grade. She spoke in paragraphs. He replied in punchlines. She aimed for nuance. He aimed for the jugular. She sounded like a blog post no one finished reading. He sounded like a roastmaster moonlighting as an assassin. And the crowd didn't come for a TED talk. They came for blood. Jessica tried. Truly she did. She clung to her citations like a life raft while Greg dismantled her points with the casual flair of a man who's been dunking on Democrats since dial-up. Every time she tried to steer the conversation back to data, Greg veered it into a sarcastic monologue that made her look like a humorless librarian in a cage match with a Red Bull-fueled comic. That night, Greg Gutfeld proved something critical. The best argument doesn't always wear a tie or come with footnotes. Sometimes the best argument is a smirk, a sideways glance, and a perfectly timed jab that leaves your opponent flailing in a sea of qualifiers and citations. Jessica Tarlov learned, painfully, that condescension might feel smart, but it doesn't land like sarcasm served medium rare with a sizzling side of "I told you so." This wasn't a policy debate. It was ideological theater, broadcast in surround sound. Greg didn't just win. He torched the stage, dropped the mic, and left Jessica wandering through the smoke, clutching her binder like a shield against humiliation. He didn't just steal the show. He rewrote the script, burned the set, and left her quoting polling data to an audience that had already changed the channel. She thought she was in a debate. Greg knew he was in a show, and he made sure no one would forget